What if death was not an end, but a bargain? A deal made in desperation, one that promised life, but only for a little while. He thought he had escaped the inevitable. He was wrong. Because death never forgets, and tonight, it came to collect. The desert wind howled as Bakari, a Malian merchant, pulled his rope tighter around his shoulders. His caravan had stopped for the night near an ancient ruin, a place whispered about in legend. The Tuareg guides refused to go near it, muttering about spirits that guarded the sounds. But Bakari wasn't a man who believed in ghost stories, he believed in wealth, and he had spent his life chasing it. As the camels rested, he wandered alone, drawn by the crumbling stones of what had once been a grand city. He traced his fingers over strange carvings on an old pillar, his breath catching. The symbols told a warning: gold sleeps beneath. Disturb it, and death awakens. But warnings had never stopped Bakari before. With his dagger, he dug into the sand beneath the pillar. The desert was relentless, but so was he. After what felt like hours, his blade struck something solid. His pulse quickened. He scraped away more sand, revealing a rusted chest. His hands trembled as he pried it open. Gold. Coins, necklaces, and bars of pure gold gleamed under the moonlight. More wealth than he had ever seen in one place. His breath came in short gasps as he ran his fingers through the treasure. He had done it. He had found the fortune of a lifetime. But then, a whisper. Soft, like the wind, but deliberate. Leave it. Bakari froze. He whipped around, his heart hammering. The desert stretched empty behind him. His men were asleep, the camel silent. He was alone. Take this gold, and death will follow you. The voice was clearer now, as if spoken directly into his ear. Cold dread crept up his spine. But then his eyes fell back to the treasure. Wealth beyond measure. He could buy an empire with this. He could be greater than any merchant before him. He scoffed, shaking off his fear. A man's fate is his own, he muttered, shoveling the gold into his satchel. The desert spirits could keep their superstitions, this treasure was his. But as he covered the chest and turned to leave, the whisper came again, colder this time. You have chosen your path, Bakari. Now walk it. A sudden gust of wind blasted sand into his face, and when he looked back, the chest was gone. No sign it had ever been there. His stomach twisted, but he ignored the unease creeping through his bones. He had his gold. Nothing else mattered. But he did not see, in the darkness behind him, a shadow rose from the sand. Watching. Waiting. If you're still watching, comment, I would take the gold, or I would leave it below. What would you do? The next morning, Bakari's caravan set off toward Timbuktu, his heart pounding with excitement. The weight of the gold pressed against his back, hidden beneath his robes. He told no one what he had found, let them believe he was simply a shrewd merchant. Soon, he would return home, the richest man in Mali. But the desert was not done with him. As they journeyed across the dunes, the sun blistering overhead, Bakari noticed something strange. The shadows of his men stretched long across the sand, but his own shadow was missing. He stopped in his tracks. His breath caught. He turned, adjusting his robe, but no matter how he moved, the sun cast no shadow behind him. Perhaps I am imagining things, he muttered, shaking his head. The sleepless night, the treasure, his mind must be playing tricks on him. But then, the first camel collapsed. The beast, strong and steady just moments ago, let out a wretched groan and crumpled into the sand. The men rushed to its side, but it was already dead. Strange, one of his guides muttered. There was no sign of sickness. Bakari swallowed hard. His gaze flickered back to the dunes behind them. The ruins were far behind now, yet he felt as if unseen eyes were watching. They left the dead camel behind and pressed on. But then, a whisper. Soft. Faint. Just like before. Bakari. He spun around. Nothing. Just endless desert. That night, as they camped beneath the stars, Bakari could not sleep. The wind howled through the dunes, carrying voices that no one else seemed to hear. And then, the second camel died. This time, the men were afraid. They huddled close, whispering about desert spirits, curses, and unseen forces that punish the greedy. Bakari clenched his fist. Superstition. That's all it was. But deep in his gut, he knew. The warning had been real. He had taken the gold. And something was following him. But the worst was yet to come. If you're still watching, comment, the curse is real, below. What do you think is happening to Bakari? By dawn, the caravan was moving again, but something had changed. The men were uneasy. The two dead camels were bad omens, and Bakari could feel the silent suspicion in their eyes. The desert stretched endlessly before them, the golden sands rolling like waves. But then, one of his men, a sharp-eyed Tuareg named Omar, stopped suddenly and knelt beside the trail. Something is wrong, Omar murmured, his fingers sifting through the sand. Bakari rode forward. What is it? Omar pointed to the ground. Our footprints, they're gone. Bakari frowned. The wind erases tracks all the time. Omar shook his head. No. Look ahead, our footprints are there. Look behind us. Bakari turned, his stomach twisting into a knot. There were no footprints behind them. The tracks of their camels, the imprints of their feet, everything they had left behind had vanished as if they had never been there. The men murmured in fear, gripping their ropes. This is not natural, one of them whispered. Omar stood, his face grim. It is as if something does not want us to return. Bakari forced a laugh. Nonsense. The sound shifts, the wind changes. But even as he spoke, the unease clawed at his mind. Then, Bakari. The whisper came again, threading through the wind like a snake. Cold. Familiar. Bakari stiffened. His eyes darted across the dunes, scanning for movement. Nothing. Omar stepped closer. Did you hear that? No, Bakari snapped, gripping the satchel of gold under his robes. We keep moving. No more foolishness. But the men hesitated. Then, suddenly, a scream. They turned. One of the younger traders had collapsed to his knees, clutching his throat. His eyes bulged, his mouth moving silently as if choking on air. Amadou. Omar rushed forward, grabbing him. The boy's body convulsed violently. And then, just as suddenly as it began, he fell limp. Dead. A horrible silence fell over the group. No one had touched him. No one had seen what happened. Omar's face turned pale. Something is here. Bakari swallowed hard. His mind screamed at him to say something. To deny it. To keep control. But for the first time since taking the gold, he felt truly afraid. And then, behind them, the wind whispered again. One by one, they will fall, until only you remain. The sun was a merciless god overhead, but a deeper, colder fear gripped the caravan. 3 deaths in 2 days. The camels. The boy. And the footprints, gone. Omar and the other men wanted answers. But Bakari had none. They buried Amadou in the sand, whispering hurried prayers before pressing forward. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. But Bakari felt it. Something unseen. Watching. Following. Then, he saw it. A figure. Standing on a distant dune. A tall, cloaked shadow against the golden suns. Unmoving. Bakari's blood turned to ice. Omar, he whispered. Do you see that? Omar squinted at the dune, then frowned. See what? Bakari's mouth went dry. The figure was gone. He shook his head. I'm imagining things. But deep down, he knew. The whisper. The deaths. The vanishing footprints. And now, this. He gripped the satchel of gold tighter. He had to make it home. He had to. A sudden gust of wind swept through the desert, and with it. Asterisk, you cannot run, Bakari. Asterisk. The whisper was right behind him. Cold breath on his neck. He whirled around, heart pounding. Nothing. He was shaking now. The men were watching him, uneasy. Omar narrowed his eyes. You're hiding something. Bakari opened his mouth, but before he could answer. A second scream. One of the men collapsed. This time, they saw it happen. A shadow, shifting, writhing, rose from the sand beneath him. Clawed hands grabbed his body, dragging him downward. The man screamed, eyes wide with terror, but the sound swallowed him whole. Gone. No trace. Silence. The men stepped back in horror. Omar turned to Bakari, his face pale. What did you do? Bakari's mouth went dry. Because deep in his heart, he knew. This was because of him. The shadow was coming closer. And this time, it would not stop, asterisk. If you're still watching, comment run, Bakari, run, below. Would you keep the gold or throw it away, asterisk. Hashtag chapter 5, The Sun Wants Blood. The desert was silent. Too silent. The men stood frozen, staring at the spot where their companion had vanished. The sun looked undisturbed, as if he had never existed. Nobody. No trace. Just emptiness. Omar turned to Bakari, his face carved with suspicion. This is not normal. Bakari swallowed hard, gripping the satchel beneath his robes. His mind raced. The whispers, the vanishing footprints, the shadow on the dunes, everything pointed to one truth. The god was cursed. But he couldn't admit that. If they knew, they might turn on him. Sandstorms shift the dunes all the time, Bakari lied, forcing his voice to stay calm. Perhaps there was a sinkhole beneath him. Omar's eyes darkened. You don't believe that? Bakari ignored him and turned to the rest of the group. We keep moving. We must reach Timbuktu before nightfall. The men hesitated. Then, reluctantly, they mounted their camels. But Bakari knew something had changed. The fear in their eyes was no longer just for the desert. It was for him. They rode in tense silence for hours. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the dunes. But as the sky burned red with sunset, a sound cut through the air. Footsteps. Not from them. Not from the camels. From behind. Bakari's heart stopped. Slowly, he turned. And there it was. A trail of footprints, appearing in the sand. One by one. As if someone, something, was walking toward them. But there was no one there. Bakari's throat tightened. Move faster, he ordered. The men saw the footprints, too. Their fear turned to panic. One of them, a man named Su, pulled his camel to a stop. We should leave an offering. Salt, water, something to appease whatever spirit is following us. Omar nodded. We cannot pretend this is normal. Bakari clenched his jaw. We do not waste supplies on foolish superstitions. But then, the whisper came again. Bakari. A voice in the wind. Closer this time. And then, the footprints ran toward them. Su screamed. He tried to turn his camel, but before he could, a hand, black as night, made of shifting sand, *** burst from the ground and grabbed his leg ***. Su shrieked, thrashing, but the sand pulled him down. The others rushed to help, grabbing his arms, but it was useless. The desert wanted him. And then, in a blink, he was gone. Nothing remained but silence. The men turned to Bakari. Their eyes were no longer just afraid. They were angry. Omar's voice was deadly quiet. What have you done? Bakari's hands trembled. Because the truth was undeniable now. He had made a deal with death. And it was collecting. The men were starting to realize the truth. But would they survive long enough to act? ***. The desert wind carried whispers. Not just the voice of the unseen presence, but the hushed voices of the men. They no longer trusted Bakari. He could feel it in the way they looked at him, ***, accusing, wary, afraid, ***. 2 more men had been taken. Swallowed by the sand. Gone without a trace. And yet, only Bakari remained untouched. Omar rode up beside him, his jaw tight with tension. This is no ordinary curse, he muttered. Something wants you, Bakari. And we are paying the price for it. Bakari gripped the reins of his camel, sweat rolling down his back. I do not know what you are talking about, he lied. Omar's eyes darkened. Enough. You have been acting strange since we left the ruins. You heard something, didn't you? You saw something. And now men are dying. The others murmured in agreement. They were afraid, but fear had turned to anger. One of them, a burly man named Haruna, rode closer. Tell us the truth, or we leave you behind. Bakari's stomach twisted. If they left him, he would be alone in the desert, with the thing that was haunting him. He had to think fast. The desert is a cruel place, he said. It does not need curses to kill men. Omar's eyes flashed. Lies. Haruna's hand drifted toward his dagger. If one more man dies, we will not wait for the spirits to take you. We will do it ourselves. A tense silence settled over the group. Bakari said nothing. He could not tell them. They would take the gold. And no matter the curse, he would not lose his fortune. He only had to make it to Timbuktu. But the desert had other plans. That night, they made camp near a small oasis. The water was low, but it was enough to cool their throats. Bakari sat apart from the others, his back to a dune, watching the fire crackle. Then, a whisper. Bakari. His blood turned to ice. He turned slowly, and froze, There, standing in the sand, was a figure. Tall. Draped in black robes that shifted like smoke. A face hidden in shadow. And in its hand, a single gold coin. Bakari's heart pounded. The figure raised the coin, letting the firelight glint off its surface. Then, in a voice that sent chills down his spine, it spoke. The price must be paid. Bakari scrambled back, his breath shallow. When he blinked, the figure was gone. But in the sand where it had stood, something gleamed. A gold coin. One of the very same coins from his satchel. His hands trembled as he reached for it. But before he could touch it, a scream tore through the night. Bakari spun around. One of the men was riding on the ground, clutching his throat. His eyes bulged, his veins turned black. And then, he stopped moving. Dead. The others leapt to their feet, their eyes turning to Bakari. Omar drew his sword. Enough, he shouted. This is because of you. You are cursed. Haruna's face was twisted with rage. Kill him, and maybe the spirits will spare us, Bakari's chest tightened. They were going to kill him. He grabbed his satchel and ran. Ran into the desert, away from the fire, away from their blades. But as he fled, the whispers followed. Run, Bakari. But you cannot escape. And behind him, footsteps appeared in the sand. Chasing him. Baker's secret is out. But can he escape before his men, or the curse, get to him fast? Bakari stood alone in the desert, his breath ragged, his body weak. He had run for days, but there was no escape. The cursed gold remained with him, a burden he could not let go of, even as it consumed him, His men were gone. Swallowed by the sands. Omar had been the last to fall, his dying words a curse of his own. May the gold you love so much be the only company you have in death. Now, Bakari was truly alone. Or so he thought. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the desert grew unnaturally still. The wind stopped. Even the stars above seemed dimmer. And then, footsteps. Not his own. Not the wind. Something else. Something unseen, coming closer. Bakari turned, and his heart stopped. The figure stood before him. Cloaked in black, its face hidden in shadow. It had followed him from the ruins. From the very moment he took the gold. It had never stopped. Please, Bakari whispered, falling to his knees. I was blind. I was greedy. The figure raised its hand. A single gold coin gleamed between its fingers. Bakari's breath caught in his throat. It was the last coin from his satchel. The final piece of the cursed treasure. The figure dropped it into the sand. The debt is paid. The words echoed through the empty desert, vibrating through the earth itself. Bakari felt it before he saw it. The ground beneath him shifted. The sand roared, opening like a great mob beneath his feet. Hands, shadowy, writhing, reached for him, clawing, pulling, He screamed, fighting against the inevitable, but it was useless. The desert was taking him. The last thing he saw was the gold coin sinking beside him, disappearing into the endless void. Then, darkness. Silence. And Bakari was no more. Months later, a different caravan passed through the region. Traders on their way to Timbuktu stopped near a small dune for rest. One of them, a curious young man, kicked at something buried in the sand. Something shiny. He bent down, brushing away the dust. A gold coin. His eyes widened. Look at this. We are blessed by the desert. An older man, a veteran of many travels, stepped forward. His face paled. Leave it, he said, his voice trembling. This is not a blessing. The young man frowned. Why? It's just gold. The wind howled suddenly, whispering through the dunes. Take this gold, and death will follow you. The veteran paled. We leave. Now. But the young man hesitated, staring at the coin. It was just gold, after all. Wasn't it? The curse never dies. It only waits, If you're still watching, comment, the desert never forgets, below. What would you have done in Bakari's place, Thank you for following this story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales,